And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocalLive Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of, well, I guess about 365,000 stories or so. We're going to tell a few tonight. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us, where you will find links to our new iHeartRadio and Spreaker podcast sites. You'll also see a link to what is the beginning of a new Coalition Radio website as we try to take advantage of some of the technologies that have popped up that even indie media can take advantage of. For the last 3 weeks, we've had an explosion in social media follows. For those of you taking a few moments of your day to do so, as we say every week, social media is, in fact, the mother's milk of indie media. Social media allows us to kind of knife our way through the white noise that's out there, the Me Too media, the fake news, I hate to even use that term, but all the nonsense that's out there. And if you're working hard on an issue or a subject, well, sometimes that's not as fun as puppy videos, kitty cat videos, makeup videos, or pimple popping videos. Who knows? But we appreciate those that have taken the time to like and share our social media. We've got a full 3 hours planned tonight. In the first hour, joining me in just a few minutes, is Kristin Calhoun. She is active with the Libertarian Party nationally, and she's going to take up the torch, as it were, this week to again focus on sex workers' rights. At 7 o'clock, in a continuing series on what to do about schools, Jonathan Butcher of the Goldwater Institute is going to join us to spend an hour with us, kind of on a free-form conversation about, well, what can the free market do to bring primary education, well, back to its former greatness? How do we make education great again? Oy. If you follow the disaster that is Rhode Island at public education, and you follow this show at all, you know that I don't really believe in public education, which is not to conflate that I don't believe in education for everyone. I just believe there's clearly a different path, and the failures that have been eliminated here in Rhode Island are nothing more or less than a microcosm of what's happening in cities across the nation. The Johns Hopkins University report, which has sort of reinvigorated our coverage of this over the last 2 weeks, is going to bring us to some pretty challenging conversations in the coming months, but we're not going to let it go. I'm privileged in a lot of ways. My children never had to spend the day in public education, and their academic careers reflect that, quite frankly. Every young person has great talent. Every young person is that great kid, and they all deserve an opportunity to live in an environment where the free market encourages them to realize their full potential as a human being. We will no longer, on this show at least, allow the soft bigotry of diminished expectations to carry on, nor will we allow that quaint social compact that we talk about so often here in our weekly 3 hour session, if you will, to rule the day. Some artificial feel-good pandering by a group of people who are more married to a philosophy than to the actual results of an education will no longer cheat our children, all those great kids, from the future that they've got a right to, well, work their butts off of. And then at 8 o'clock, we're going to talk about, well, Justin Amash. If you live in the Libertarian or the Republican or the right-of-center universe, you know that, quite frankly, the last couple of days have been a maelstrom, as they say. Connor Dragatis of 71republic.com wrote an op-ed piece today that I found intriguing. I haven't ever had a chance to meet with him. I spoke to him only briefly. And we're going to talk about, well, his libertarian outlook on the up-and-coming presidential elections. So let's get right down to it. It's been 4+ years that we've been covering on the Coalition sex worker rights. We go back to Coalition 1.0, which was in a small AM radio bunker. I don't know if I'd even call it a station, AM 790, wonderful people, part of the cumulus AM 630 WPRO juggernaut. And we've been fortunate over the years to get a number of folks who are intimately involved in both the politics, the work, the lifestyle, the ethos, and the ethics of what it's like to be a sex worker here in the United States with this incredibly conflicted mechanism that is starting eerily to take on, if you will, the trappings of the war on drugs. So joining me for the first time is someone who I haven't had a chance to meet in real time, is Kristin Calhoun. Now, she is a sex worker. She's also a member of the Libertarian Party, an active member, and a co-founder of the Libertarian Party Sex Worker Rights Caucus. I'll read you a little piece from her article in this current issue of the Libertarian written pamphlet that crisscrosses the country. The caucus was created to dispel the myths surrounding sex work and also co-align with other sex worker rights organizations to push forward for full decriminalization of sex work. First and foremost, consensual sex work and sex trafficking are not the same. And to her credit, and to Sarah Daggers and a number of other hardworking folks in the Libertarian Party is the first major party nationally. Remember, in 2016, the Libertarian Party had ballot access across the entire nation. So we are the only sex worker rights platform/base party to address this challenging issue head on. Kristen, first of all, thank you for joining me on a beautiful Friday night. I know you're out in the Midwest. I'm not sure if it's quite as gorgeous out there as it is out here. It's a spectacular New England evening, and we appreciate you taking time to tackle what is truly one of the, we call it here, the third rail issues in American politics today. Thanks for joining the coalition.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So let's, we're going to go down two paths, if you will, and whenever we have folks from the industry on, we point out right away that what we're trying not to do here, and we've always avoided it, is this sort of spectacle of quote-unquote sex work, the cheap thrill, that's not what this is about. The focus on this needs to be a human rights issue and a worker rights issue, and quite frankly, an issue of free markets. So there's really two paths we can go down tonight. The first one that it's almost cliche on the show, but I always go down is for a libertarian, regardless of what their background and what their work is, everyone's had that sort of liberty moment. Kristen, at what moment in your life did you realize, yikes, I'm a libertarian?
That's an interesting question. And honestly, the reason that I joined the Libertarian Party is because of their stance on the decriminalization of sex work, and just going over their party platform and really everything else that they truly believe in. It's just everything clicked. Mm-hmm. Literally everything that is what makes a libertarian. I just said, this is me. It was enlightening. It was exciting, and I was very happy to be part of it.
Excellent. So how long have you been involved with the organization on, say, at least a semi-formal level?
Oh, well, I would say, semi-formally, I supported Gary Johnson when, he was running for president. I actually didn't officially join the party and actually get officially involved until just this year. So it's been relatively new, actually getting politically involved and, getting more into the nuts and bolts of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Well, welcome aboard. I mean, your talent and your perspective is certainly welcome. Why do you think other political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats in particular, have really just avoided the conversation completely?
Well, it's twofold. First of all, it's taboo because discussing any sort of sex in America is still taboo. Mm-hmm. And also, we're completely up against this incorrect assumption that when we talk about sex work, we're talking about sex trafficking. And I've even had, lots of people in the Libertarian Party, when we post things talking about that we support the decriminalization of sex work, they immediately come back and say, well, I don't want to be part of an organization that's okay with sex trafficking.
Right.
And it's something that, the sex trafficking organizations, have pushed for. That's what they want. And it's something that, we have to educate and dispel so that, hopefully we can move forward. And what we want to do is decriminalize consensual adult sex work, which will, in actuality, help those that are being sex trafficked so that they can come forward and they can work with, law enforcement and get out of their situation that they're in and, move forward with their life.
In a sense, I'm putting you on the spot with this question, but it's been so important to me because I've interviewed literally at this point dozens of folks who are, again, work in the industry as well as simultaneously are political activists.
Mm-hmm.
Did you make a choice to do this? Were you coerced in any way?
Yes.
So,
absolutely not.
You look forward to work. This is your career. You embrace it. You enjoy it.
Well, and like anybody that has a job, I mean, there's days that are not as pleasant as others. But
right.
I guess the way what I tell people is, when people question, what I do and ask me, if I enjoy it, I say, I'm living the American dream. I have my own business. I created my business. I, do my advertising. I do book work just like any other business. And if it was any other industry, what I'm doing as a woman, having my own business and being successful would be extremely supported. But instead, because, I'm doing sex work, I continue to get called extremely vile things by people on Facebook and Twitter for literally no reason because I don't know them. But, it's still something that, calling a sex worker terrible name still somewhat acceptable, which is something, else that we're, trying to fix as well.
Why do you think folks create this dichotomy? In a very real sense, if you work past the stigma, quote unquote, in some cases, if you work past society's preoccupations, their confusion, their frustration, their embarrassment with all issues sexual, virtually, I would say half of the economy is based on the voluntary use of someone's body, if you will, and mind, because sex work incorporates both, and in a financial transaction. And in its most simplest format, is there any real difference between, say, the construction worker, who literally, they could be a highly skilled machinist, but they're up there in the building, working it hard, sweating it hard, pounding away on their body, and is there any difference between the transaction on its most basic form between that of a sex worker and someone who uses their body in other forms of bodily labor?
Most definitely not. And, that's something that, so many people have the difficult time, actually processing in their brains is that, this is a job. There are days that, obviously I really, really like my job, and there are days that it's challenging. But at the same time, this is my profession that I chose. And I'm a consenting adult. And it's crazy that in America today, I still cannot do a profession that I chose and that it's illegal. I mean, it's absolutely just ridiculous, and it's crazy that we don't have more people that are upset about this.
Right. In fact, if anything else, they mistakenly, simultaneously objectify you and create and portray you as a victim when neither is appropriate, is it?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And, we talk about these organizations that saying that they're, working to help sex trafficked victims, when in fact a lot of these organizations, what they're doing is they are financially, as well as sometimes physically, helping to support law enforcement to do these things in which everybody gets arrested. So I don't know what other, parts of, or what other type of quote-unquote crime where the quote-unquote victim gets arrested as well and, treated as a criminal.
When it's entirely, and I want to stress this, it's entirely your choice. We've spoken offline, and as in so many cases, you have other opportunities that you could pursue if you chose to.
Most definitely.
So, and your life, as we talked about offline, some of your interests, I argue that you're a Renaissance woman. You do a number of things well, and yet you choose to pursue sex work as your financial safety net, your earnings, that provides you a lifestyle in which you're able to do these other interests really as a hobby and a love. It's afforded you a number of opportunities that conventional workplace may not. I mean, am I overstating it, or is that a fair statement?
No, I would completely agree. And that's the other thing that a lot of people don't understand as well. I mean, when you really boil it down. I mean, obviously there are people in this industry that are doing this, to survive, and unfortunately they don't have other options. But there also are a lot of people in the sex work industry that do this because it is quite lucrative. Right. I mean, we do this because we enjoy it. We do it because we make it a decent amount of money, and to us it's a good financial business decision for our life. So there's still that disconnect, that all of us are living in squalor, and all of us are don't have any money, and we're all on drugs, which is, I mean, it's just, of course there's some that are, but that's with any
Sure.
division of a society. Mm-hmm. But to say that that's what a sex worker is just completely false. Which
brings up the next, equally if not more challenging discussion, which is those folks who, and if folks aren't new to studying the industry, you'll hear the term survival sex. And survival sex, and
mm-hmm.
please jump in where I'm wrong, because I'm not an expert. I just play one on the radio. But survivor sex is functionally folks who are, in a very real sense, engaging in consensual sex in exchange for money, so that they can make rent. They might be single moms in desperate circumstances where they can put money on the table and feed their children and clothe their children. And here is, to me, the most appalling part of that. Putting it as survival sex seems to, in the minds of the establishment, give permission for them to look past someone like you, who is independent, assertive, in control of their lives, and look at someone who's engaging in survival sex and apply the appropriate amount of pity and look down on them, and when in fact the workplace or the educational place or events in their lives have put them in a position where, and this is going to be, it's going to be difficult for me to express properly, but if it wasn't for consensual sex work, they might not have any income at all. In a real sense, it's like going into different labor situations, and boy, we saved you from those evil employers. You have no money now, you have no way to feed your family, but congratulations. We did the righteous, liberal government thing. I mean, and again, I'm seeking confirmation from you in the sense because I'm trying to project on you, as someone who doesn't work in the business, just a series of hypotheses that we're attempting to develop here so that we can take the narrative and just throw it out its head, because the narrative that's established now needs to be trashed. It needs to be destroyed. So
I agree, and the term survival sex, I don't particularly like that. That is the term that's currently being used. But I mean, what I would like to point out is, we literally have people or organizations that say that they're quote unquote saving sex workers from being sex workers so that they can get them into minimum paying jobs.
Right.
Now, when you break it down like that, you look at it and you say, but that doesn't make any sense. You could have, a single mother who, is a sex worker, and she could literally probably do it part-time, make as much or more than she would, in a minimum wage job, and, care for her family, not have them in daycare, have food for her family, yet that's still frowned upon more than, if she did some other type of work.
Right. Right. It's the logical extreme of, in order to save the village, we had to burn it. Well, we've saved them, in the case of, we always look back to Vietnam with that statement, we've saved them from the perils of communism, but tough luck, they're dead.
Right.
We showed them, or go to Waco, Texas, or any form anywhere in the world where government intervenes on people's behalf when people ultimately would just like to be, just left alone. Or
Yeah, exactly. just let us do our thing. Okay, so I wanted to kind of go off on a tangent talking about, the saving sex workers. So one of the books that I just recently read, which is an excellent book, and I would recommend it to anyone, is Revolting Prostitutes, which is by Juno Mack and Molly Smith. They're out of the UK, but they do talk a lot about American issues with sex work as well as issues all around the world. And one of the stories that they commented on, and I'm pretty sure it was Juno, but it might have been Molly that actually talked to some of these sex workers. So when we had George Bush, who was president, the first George Bush, he had an issue with the quote-unquote sex trafficking in Cambodia. So he indicated to them that, we were going to be cutting off our aid to Cambodia unless they did something with their quote-unquote sex trafficking. So what the government decided to do is they were going to go in to all of the brothels, and they were going to round up all of the sex workers, and they were going to take them to jails where they stayed for months. Some of them were raped. Some of them were beaten. They were not being treated correctly. And this was the solution. This was the solution. So, and the other thing is, they said, well, they were going to find them, better jobs. So their better job was that they were going to teach them how to be seamstresses. So they take them to these factories where they're going to be seamstresses, where they're literally working 12 hours a day in hot, nasty conditions, right, making less money, working much harder, and in much worse conditions. Well, what do you think a lot of these sex workers did? They actually, tried to get away from these and go back to the brothels because the brothels paid better. The brothels had much better conditions. They were cleaner. They didn't have to work as many hours, and they were able to spend more time with their families.
Right.
So this was just an excellent example that she gave of how rescue doesn't work. Doesn't work here. It doesn't work in any other country.
Now, let's talk about rescue for a second. Great point. You live in the Midwest. Out here in Providence, yeah, we've got an organization called Day One, which has got a multi-million-dollar budget, including a significant six-figure budget for the executive director, engages in all type of preaching and politicking and speaking and arguably little or nothing of value to folks who've decided to, quote-unquote, get off the street and are looking for physical assistance. They occupy and own a very expensive building in the heart of the toniest part of Providence, what we call the East Side. So my argument is they are little or no use to anyone who actually is on the streets, finds themselves engaging in survival section, is looking for a way out. What has been the approach in your neck of the woods, generically speaking, towards this incredible industry that's popped up, to quote unquote, air quotes, help the downtrodden?
Well, I honestly live in the middle of super tiny Midwest Wisconsin, so I virtually don't have a lot of contact with this. I was just recently in Milwaukee, and on my way back, I was driving through Appleton, and which is another smaller city, and there is a group that's in that particular neck of the woods, and they had a billboard with a child on it crying and saying that something about we need to help fight child sex trafficking and what have you. I went on their website. Kind of one of those, I did try to call them, but shockingly nobody called me back. One of those organizations that literally, it seems to be their front is that, they're fighting for sex trafficking victims. Couldn't really find any way that they actually help them, but they definitely help, the law enforcement so they can do things so they can, arrest consenting sex workers.
Right. And that's why it reminds me so much of the failed war on drugs. There's a great internet meme that's, as memes do, summed it up so nicely. The most dangerous thing about getting caught smoking pot is getting caught with it. Right. Very often in a pre-Fosta, pre-SESTA world where folks could electronically communicate, act as a community, use the advantages of the internet for physical safety, you had women coming out of the shadows, able to control their own lives, their own destinies, their own financial empires, if you will, control their own branding, their marketing, all of that. And live a life beyond fear, beyond recrimination. And in effect, the market had decided to leave them alone, sort of a laissez-faire attitude towards sex worker up until the last year or two or three ago, per se. Using it loosely. Now, here on the East Coast, Fosta and SESTA in the urban areas, the federal legislation that for folks who are uninitiated to the lingo, effectively criminalizes electronic communication between people involved in sex work, conflating it, if you will, with trafficking. So if you belong to a board like 411 or a number of the as so often happens, the internet pops up with solutions to problems that you would only face in a particular industry. There are all sorts of ways to date check references on people that you would be involved with. What's it been like at least in the Midwest in terms of women's safety, trans safety, the ability to screen? How has that impacted you folks?
Well, I've been in this industry for a while, and honestly, at this point, the majority of people that I see are just my repeat clients, so I do very seldom see anybody new anymore. Mm-hmm. I am on P411, so if I do see someone new, that's usually, one of the platforms that I use to screen new people. So that's something that I use. But yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that the very websites that allowed sex workers to be indoors, which is, in and of itself safer, so that we can screen clients, we can find out information from them, we can access websites where, these particular clients may have been blacklisted or have been aggressive or stole from a sex worker. Those particular sites that, sex workers were able to access before are no longer here. So what does this do? This forces, unfortunately, sex workers that need to pay their bills to engage in sexual activity that they may have not agreed to before, as well as, see people that they're not able to screen because, at this point, what's happened is the clients are in control. Mm-hmm. So they can say, well, you know what, if you really need the money, I don't think I need to give you my screening info. And, I'm going to, give you half as much as what you're asking for because I know that you need the money.
Right.
So, it's something that, everybody said was supposed to make sex workers, have better lives or, be safer. It's done 100% the opposite.
And that really dives back into the libertarian message, doesn't it? Is that ultimately government is not our friend. The reaction to government, as we say here in the coalition, often the rule of unintended consequences is so predictable now that, quite frankly, one has to believe that they're intended consequences. It's just so easily predictable. Government has made your coworkers' lives more difficult, more dangerous, more financially challenged, and has resulted in what many experts, and by the way, folks, in the sex workers world, if you will, as an outsider, I've gotten to meet a number of people involved in both academics and in the community. There's a term called allies, folks who are perhaps academics, folks who are community activists, civic leaders, people like that, generally qualify as allies. In fact, there's a wonderful organization called the Sex Workers Allies Network up in Boston that has been very helpful in the last year or two with the show. And, those folks even face criminal prosecution if, in fact, they use any level of electronics, any level of digital communication to act as support services, literally. So you have cases where an organization called Swap Behind Bars, which works closely with folks who have been incarcerated, men, women, and trans, and ultimately, they find themselves, who in many cases, their activities are basic. They're talking about, giving, small money grants out to people who are leaving the prison system, clothing, reading material. All of this becomes challenged because of this idiotic law and the government. How many, and the estimates of how many people have died as a result of violence on sex workers, particularly in the trans community, varies greatly, but the general consensus among the Allies Network and the academic network who studies federal and state and local crime statistics is that people are dying because of this. Congratulations,
Yes.
Bill. Yeah.
And the other thing that I just recently, brought up to someone that was going to be talking to Camilla Harris, I believe today or tomorrow, was, the fact that the SESTA Fosta laws have been put into place, but they have done literally zero to follow up on the laws to confirm if they actually are reducing sex trafficking. I don't know about you, but if we're going to be enacting a law for a specific reason, why is there literally no one that's following up on it to confirm if it actually did anything to help what it was originally intended for?
And I will answer that is because the intention of government laws has little to do with an actual set of desired results. It has more to do with fundraising, the appearance of caring about desired results, and an emotional content which is on display to prove that virtue signaling is the primary objective of your life. That's why. And that's why most of the mental masturbation that constitutes federal and state and local laws in places like Rhode Island, which at one point in time had the unique position of being, besides Las Vegas and Las Vegas County, I guess, the only other place in America where sex work was legal under significant circumstances, pulled back, and boy,
that is correct.
We've showed them.
It was that indoor sex work was decriminalized.
Because of a poor, and this is the true story.
Because someone made an error.
Exactly. Because some federal state and local incompetent did what they usually do, and usually on behalf of the forces of evil as opposed to the forces of good, and they screwed up. And so a sympathetic judge caught them on it, and then the do-gooders just spent the next few years. At the time when they reversed the law, when they corrected the law, I sat there in disbelief because I didn't know any better. I hadn't spoken to anybody. I had your typical reaction. I sat there in disbelief as a number of community leaders from poorer sections of Providence came forward and pointed out rightly that this was the loss of a significant part of income. This state, and I hope you'll get to Rhode Island soon. If you're out this way, please let us know. So we'll take you to dinner and give you the tour of the town. But this is a state for whom the adult entertainment community represents a measurable percentage of the local gross domestic product. Sex work is everywhere here, and yet it's nowhere. There are dozens of strip clubs in a tiny, tiny state. There is all sorts of underground swingers clubs, fetish clubs. It's everywhere in this state. And yet, and so this state is the poster child for hypocrisy. We're so very Catholic and we're so opposed to it, while so simultaneously a significant amount of the money here comes from it.
Exactly.
Now, explain from your perspective, and this is challenging to libertarians, and I'm sure you've run into this many, many times. Libertarians typically argue for freedom of. So we don't typically, and I use this term very carefully because I understand the reasoning. It's been explained to me. But decriminalization as opposed to legalization for a libertarian is a half measure. We stop all the time, and I can see every time a libertarian who hasn't really contemplated the sex workers platform kind of sits back and says, well, why aren't we making it completely legal? So from your perspective, why isn't the sex worker community calling for complete legalization?
Sure. Okay, so the main... the easy way I'll say that I explain it is when you decriminalize something, you are taking away the laws that make it illegal. When you legalize something, you are adding laws, restrictions, regulations to make something legal. Mm-hmm. So as libertarians, we don't want any more laws for anything. So that's why, we're fighting for decriminalization of sex work as well as, recreational drugs, which is a whole other topic. But, it's adding laws to anything does not make anything safer, better, or easier, or, a better thing for, our community and society.
Right. And there's the practical implications as well, aren't there? There's still, regardless of whether it's decriminalized or not, there is still the legal stigma of being, quote-unquote, associated with this, everywhere from housing courts to preschools to churches, virtually every part of our life takes a group of people for whom they claim such sympathy and empathy, and does everything they can to marginalize them if, in fact, they engage in a behavior that doesn't quite meet their personal self-inflicted standards, does it?
Exactly, and that's exactly true. I had a gentleman tweet me today with, saying that I should get a real job where I stand up, and then ended it with a cross and praying hands emoji. So I mean, we have this, Christian community who seems to, say that they care about others, yet have extremely, stigmatized and been very negative and vocal against, the sex worker community, which, it's sad and it's frustrating, and that's a whole other ball of wax.
Now, without assessing on it, was this someone who just reached out of the blue, saw you online, saw your presence? I mean, what?
You know what? I'm pretty vocal on Twitter. So okay. I mean, my normal thing is when I comment on something, I tell people I'm a sex worker. If you have questions, ask me questions, because I think a lot of sex workers, they don't want to have to deal with that, so they don't necessarily make their position public. And I feel like that the more that we're able to humanize sex workers and more that people are able to connect with them and see that, ultimately we're just regular people, just doing our jobs every day. I think that's going to ultimately help us. And, unfortunately I get crucified often for it, but, I'm still here and I'm still fighting the fight. So.
Well, and you again, I'm having the time of my life talking to you because you just set up. This is like political t-ball. You keep just setting it up. You make it so easy for me because the biggest irony of all, for all this marginalization, condescension, for all the preaching and the diatribes and the laws and the hysteria, business is pretty good, isn't it? There's no shortage of people looking to engage.
No, and that's the other thing, that I've, that people say, well, some people say, well, I don't think sex workers should be arrested, but we should go with the Nordic model, right, where the clients are arrested, which literally it's ridiculous, and it's not really any different than the complete criminalization model that we have now in the U.S. What I said. How is that helping anyone? I mean, it's so ridiculous, and that if you're not passing a law or supporting a law that's actually going to help an entire community, what's the point? And a lot of the pushback is, well, if we pass this, then you'll be forced to get a quote unquote real job. Well, it's completely criminalized right now, and there's approximately 1 million consensual sex workers in the U.S. right now. So no, that's not going to change anything. I mean, ultimately what's going to change is if we decriminalize this, every sex worker that's arrested, taxpayers are not going to be paying the, $3,000 approximately according to your state, fees to process a sex worker and, whatever else. I mean, it's just, right. It's such a drain on the taxpayer base as well that they don't realize that.
Right. I mean, if you combine cannabis and sex work, the amount of money that we spend, and I won't even use the term victimless crime anymore because there's no crime and there's no victim.
Exactly.
The amount of money that we spend as a society while claiming poor out, all right, and while overburdening taxpayers, because taxation is in fact been clinically proven without a doubt by scientists around the world to be theft because of the coercive nature of government, arbitrarily removing resources from the individual with no recourse to redistribute amongst others. Yes, it is theft. All right, the amount of money that we dedicate to this is staggering, and that really points to the real issue, isn't it? Isn't it all about the fact that you've got a whole lot of people who can make money marginalizing sex workers and arresting people in the inner city for quote unquote weed, isn't it? Isn't that what it really comes down to?
Exactly. So I want to give you a statistic, about sex trafficking. I don't know if you know Norma Jean Almodovar.
Yeah, she's actually been on the show.
Okay. Oh, okay, very good. So what her website, which is Police, Prostitution, and Politics, which she has every statistics for everything, sex worker related and police related that there exists. So, something that she came out with and sent me all of her info was the last ones that we ever did are 2017 because we're dealing with the government and they're always years behind on stuff.
Right.
But, when you add up all the numbers, in 2017, approximately 30,000 sex workers were arrested for sex-related crimes. Of that particular 30,000 people, about 450, after investigation, were found to be sex trafficked. So that comes down to be about 1.5%.
Right.
Still terrible, still not good. But, when we look at the whole scheme of things, we are not helping, sex trafficked victims by arresting all of these consensual sex workers. 30,000. I mean, that's just, I can't even wrap my brain around that. Yet we have all of these organizations all over the U.S. that people are pouring money into saying they're trying to help sex trafficked victims. There's 450 in the U.S. in 2017 that were found.
This is the single biggest con job perpetrated upon the American taxpayer since the days of reefer madness, without any doubt. We are being taken for a multi-billion-dollar ride. And when you add, and when you look at what's the cost of the war on drugs, ultimately was, and I'm not just talking about the money, I'm talking about the families destroyed, people incarcerated, the cost of incarceration, the international impact of narco-terrorism stimulated by the war on drugs. When you look at that, the communities like Ferguson and Baltimore and Staten Island that were torn apart. Did we lose you? Did we lose you, Kristen? Are you still here? We're going to take.
If you get,
okay.
I mean,
You're still here.
sorry.
If you look at that cost, it is staggering societally.
What it boils down to is, and that's the exact same thing with sex trafficking, is if you get people to emotionally connect with anything, they immediately feel that it's correct. So on another tangent that I have here, I was talking to a couple of gals on Twitter who were passing around a meme that said that millions of children are being, sex trafficked every year in the U.S. Now, if we go back to the statistics that Norma Jean has put together for all of us, which are from the FBI, in 2014, the number of cases that after investigation they found were actually children being sex trafficked, it was 14. Now, which is still, I'm never making excuses for this, still awful and terrible, and we do not support this, whatever. But when you are passing around memes saying that millions of children are being sex trafficked every year, it is just so incredibly wrong. And when I was trying to explain this to them and explain to them that, what you're doing to try to help these children is not helping, you are really just realistically putting consensual sex workers who are over the age of 18 in jail. And, they just could not wrap their brain around the fact that, they're chasing after children or victims that ultimately, they don't exist.
And here is the most tragic irony of all. Ultimately, both anecdotally and statistically, the community most responsible for exposing sex trafficking was folks who worked legitimately in the sex industry.
Yes. Thank you.
Wow. You can't make this shit up.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And the other thing is, when you have clients who, say, I felt kind of iffy about this person when I saw them, but I'm married and I have 3 kids, and if I go to the police, I can't expose myself or get arrested for soliciting.
Right.
How is that helping sex trafficked victims?
It's not. We're a nation that believes that if you train enough maids who work at Marriott, or you harass enough women who
Marriott,
who literally sit at a bar. All right, if you're a woman sitting at a bar at a hotel, ruh-roh, you're clearly a woman of ill repute.
Yes.
My wife travels sometimes.
Yeah,
she goes.
The Marriott actually worked directly with. You're probably familiar with the Polaris Project.
Yeah.
Who, I mean, they sent all of the Marriott employees through sex trafficking schools so that they can spot them.
Oh.
How much money do you think the Polaris Project made from this, school that they created for all of the Marriott employees? I mean, come on.
My God, I mean, what a scam. And so, it's
Right.
interesting because I don't play the boycott card very often, but, quite frankly, I don't want, I am blessed. There are, in my immediate family, there's my wife and my two daughters. Both of my daughters travel extensively. My wife does on occasion. Both of them are independent. All of them are independent, smart women, smarter than me, quite frankly. And I just want them to go nowhere near that organization because, quite frankly, the prospect that they would victimize, marginalize, and at the same time stereotype people makes me ill. Right. So I personally I advocate boycotts that I want, but I'm done.
Right.
They won't get any of my money until they
Right.
lighten up on that. Now we've only got a couple minutes left, and again, Kristen, I'm so grateful for you joining me tonight, and I hope we do this on a regular basis. What's the next step, do you think, in this election? I mean, you're active with one of the campaigns already, but you also
Yes, I am.
You are also, and I believe with Kim Ruff, right? If I'm correct.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I am.
So, which is wonderful. We've had Kim on, we've had John Phillips on, we've had just about the entire campaign on. I think they're doing an amazing job, particularly since they are a grassroots campaign.
Yes.
What do you think the next step of the Libertarian Party is? We've got the platform. Is there anything you're working on right now, or how do we, and clearly creating a caucus. And folks, if you're not familiar with the Libertarian movement, caucuses have sort of a larger than life presence in the party. There's 3 or 4 that are formally recognized by the Libertarian Party, the Radical Caucus. Then there's the folks over at Mises who are doing, quite frankly, a wonderful job of their thing, which is focusing on Austrian economics. You've got now the Sex Workers Caucus, which, how is that going to be used, do you think? Or do you have any ideas yet you're getting your hands around how you could use that for political solutions to what is clearly a political problem?
Well, okay, so the caucus we have it's more of like an internal libertarian. That's like our think tank. So we have our public Facebook page, which is Libertarians for Decrim. Mm-hmm. We also have our Twitter page that we just recently put up, which is also Libertarians for Decrim. Mm-hmm. And we also do work closely with Kim and John. We do have some big stuff in the works. I'm not going to tell you everything. You'll have to watch.
Okay.
But we do have some big stuff in the works to get out publicly, not just Kim's campaign, but the LP platform of our 100% support of decriminalization of sex work. Okay. So it's going to be soon. It's going to be big, and we're hoping it's going to get the word out and get other, not just us, but other political parties talking about this, because that's ultimately what we want. We want everybody talking about this, everybody asking questions, everybody finding out the truth.
And that's really, when you look at any one of a number of human rights movements in the last 100 years, and there have been several, and I do consider this to be nothing less than a human rights movement that's under considerable pressure, ironically, from a government that yesterday celebrated its quote-unquote independence and freedom, despite allowing very little of that these days.
Exactly.
It's human rights have been largely gained by understanding open-air conversations, folks understanding that, and let's go back to the gay rights movement. And I say this often on the show, but once folks realized that it wasn't the gays, that it was your buddy on the softball team or your cousin or that aunt or uncle that was always...
And you realize they're regular people.
Right.
Shocking, right?
Right. And once realized that people of color were in fact not what they'd been betrayed for in a good part of the 19th and 20th century, not even remotely. Once people understood that they were folks just like us, and yet at the same time, this type of abrogation of human rights diminishes their potential, and as a result diminishes all of our potential because of their forced absence from the scene of what's called life and achievement in the free market. Once people realize that, without even thinking about it, they cease the behavior. So I'm with you 100%. And that everything we need to do is all about having those quiet conversations with people, and of course the occasional really loud, noisy, Sarah Dagger-esque protest. Which listen.
Yes.
I've got a bullhorn, and I ain't afraid to use it. So.
Awesome.
All right. Well, how can folks find you out there in the world? Feel free to engage, and we've got about 2 or 3 minutes. Feel free to engage in shameless self-promotion, as we call it here in the coalition.
Shameless. Well, on Twitter, you can find me at WIMISS@CARLET. So at Wisconsin Miss Scarlet is me.
Okay, and we shared that earlier, so folks can discuss politics or really anything with you. Your openness.
They can. I also have chickens, so feel free to ask me about my chickens. So.
There you go. All right.
I'm open.
Well, listen, heartfelt.
Thank you so much for having me on, and this was a great discussion, and as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, and I'm really happy that you're helping to get the word out for us.
Well, listen, please don't be a stranger, and again, if life should bring you into Greater New England anytime before we meet in Texas next year, please let us know so that we can either have you on the show or, if nothing else, show you what a toddle in town is. Because, listen, I'll leave you with this thought. There are more ways to sin in Providence than any other country in America, any other city in America, and including Las Vegas. We make Las Vegas look like Salt Lake City, all right? Or Wausau.
Excellent.
Okay? Listen, Kristen Calhoun, she is, of course, the co-founder of the Libertarian Party Sex Workers' Rights Caucus. It was great to have you on because I've had some wonderful activists, but it's really heartening to see folks from who are just immersed themselves in the libertarian movement. Congratulations to you, Sarah, and the entire crew working on behalf of what really is a fundamental human rights issue, and we'll have you back on again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, buddy. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocalLive Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the Renaissance City, La Prove, the Naked City, the city of about 365,000 stories. We're telling a few tonight. Jonathan Butcher's up next. He has been with us before. He's the education guru, if you will, at the Goldwater Institute, that amazing organization based in Arizona, who brings a three-headed hydra, if you will, think tank, journalistic efforts, model legislation. They bring that to the table and seeking liberty and justice for all. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.